and welcome back to another edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode. And boy, do we have a ton to talk about from the ASCA's backyard. It may have been a light week, but it certainly was not light on storylines. Randle Woods, after 52 races over 4 years, is finally an ASCA winner again. And in dramatic fashion as well. We'll talk all about that finish between himself and Todd Kidd and what one final win means for his already illustrious ASCA legacy. We also got to talk championship as well because Todd Kidd certainly responded to Braeden Bennett's haymaker at the Stoneyard. Leads down to 5 points, 2 weeks remaining. Who comes out on top with the championship? We'll break down that, the driver point of view, as well as the organizational point of view. Ronnie Woods Motorsports versus Michael White Racing head to head. These two clearly have nailed the new regulations. They've been far and away the two powerhouse teams. We'll break that down as well as predicting who comes out on top with the championship. We'll also break down the Craftsman Series title fight. Caden Dunham versus Gunnar Thorson heading into their penultimate round in San Diego. And we got to talk Craftsman silly season as well because silly season is pretty much almost wrapped up on the Cup side. We only got one more ride left to reveal, and that's the Tico Bound Motorsports number 10. But on the Craftsman side, we still got Kirk Autosport just dropped this morning. We've got the Ford development program slated to drop next week. And we'll break down the Kirk Autosport expansion. Drew Taylor signed to the number 23. And then we'll break down the full penultimate weekend in the ASCA. Split weekend, of course. Craftsman Series out west in San Diego. Cup Series back east in West Virginia. We'll break it all down for you on this edition of the pod. But first, before we get into it, we got to shout out the ASCA's merch shop. And if you want to rep Randle Woods, a two-time champion, and his final 2 weeks, you can do so by clicking that link in bio and using code SEASON12 at checkout to save 30% off your purchase. We got tons of Randle Woods gear still up on the site. One commemorating his farewell tour, other just the regular merch, hoodies, mugs, whatever you want to rep Randle Woods in his final 2 ASCA starts, you can go do that. Clicking that link in bio. And then while you're at it, use coupon code ASCA for free shipping on any orders $30 or more, not free shipping, reduced shipping on any orders $30 or more inside the US from Circle B Diecast or Plan B sales. But without further ado, let's get into it. And Randle Woods, the two-time champion, takes potentially one last win. I think the consensus here is this will probably be his final win. So if you watched that race on Saturday, you watched a truly historic moment in the ASCA. And what better place for Woods to get the job done than at home? The track that it all began at. I feel like everything about this race just came full circle. You had Woods running his throwback scheme to his maiden championship run. You had him winning the race at home, Computer Motor Speedway. You had him battling it out with Todd Kidd. Remember that the race that Woods scored his first championship at Belltown in 2019, that was also Todd Kidd's first win. And we all know what Todd Kidd has done throughout the 2020s. That's who Woods held off to reach victory lane. And an unlikely foe is probably the reason why Woods ended up winning this race. 4-time champion Diego Urquidy. And we'll talk about this in a second as well. The hand that Urquidy played in honestly helping Woods score the victory. Because if Urquidy doesn't do what he did, I don't think Woods wins this race. But overall, you just can't help but feel glad. Like, I don't know a single person who was not rooting for Randle Woods to win that race. Obviously, I get it. Todd Kidd fans are going to root for their driver. But I think that the consensus is everyone else wanted to see this one last time, Woods reaching victory lane. And, it's something that was 4 years in the making. I mean, when he won his third race of 2023, who would have thought it'd take until 2026 for him to reach victory lane again? I mean, this is the ASCA's winningest driver of all time. 29 Craftsman Series wins, the most all time. 27 Cup Series wins, the fourth most all time. Who would have thunk it would take this long? He would ever go on a winless drought for this long, for that matter, a dry spell. Um, it's just crazy, but that's kind of the way the ASCA works. Woods getting older, getting up there in years, his skill set starts to diminish a little bit. And even so, you can't call him washed. The dude's top 5 in points in his farewell season. Think about that for a second. Top 5 in points in its farewell season, and he just won a race. Like, I think that if Woods truly wanted to, he could easily run another 2 to 3 years and still compete with the best of them. That's just how good he is. But obviously, he has got the offer to take the vice chairman role at Michael White Racing, take much more of an executive role at the team. He's been mentoring Tony Doval II heavily over the past couple years, his successor in the number 18. He wants to pass the torch, and now the team's got another superstar driver who might just deliver them a championship, and Braeden Bennett. Um, it's not a bad time for Woods to bow out. He's also now a father. He's a husband. He's a father to 2 kids. They're young right now. He wants to watch them grow up. You understand the decision for sure. Like, he certainly has taken a step back in performance, but he's not washed. And despite him not taking home a Windows 300 in its farewell tour, you could tell in victory lane, this is a guy that has nothing left to prove. He's done everything you can ask for in the sport and then some. I mean, any driver would dream to have Randle Woods' career. Ajax 200 winner, Northern 200 winner, 2-time Cup Series champion, Craftsman Series champion, 29 Craftsman wins, 27 Cup wins. I mean, it does not get much better than what Woods has done over, nearly 2 decades of racing in the sport. And for all the hype, all the expectations that were thrown upon him as an 18, 19-year-old kid, the son of Ronnie Woods, to live up to those and then some, and then most importantly, carve out his own legacy in the sport. Like, obviously, he was at his father's team for most of his formative years in the sport, and he was known for never being able to win a championship. So consistent, all those top 3 points finishes, could never win a title. First year, gets a $100 million contract at Michael White Racing with Toyota. First year, goes out, wins 4 races, fends off Diego Urquidy, and wins himself a championship back in 2019. So it comes full circle where he throws it back to that scheme and finally snaps his winless drought with what will probably be his final win in the ASCA. It's one of those moments that you're going to look back at and you're going to remember where you were when you saw it happen. Like, that is just incredible. It truly does. It's one of those that brings a tear to your eye. And it's like, man, everything truly came full circle for Randle Woods, including his arch nemesis helping him out potentially one last time. Let's talk about that, because Diego Urquidy, miserable weekend. We're not going to get into what he said over the radio or if he's going to fire his entire team like he threatened to do. That's a moot point. But we will talk about the impact he had on the finish of the race, because Todd Kidd, he was mowing Randle Woods down in those closing laps. And Woods, if you didn't know, if you hadn't watched, if you're a newer viewer and hadn't watched, Woods in his prime, he's always been a bottom feeder. And I'm talking like he never ventures to the top of the racetrack. Never. Remember, there was that infamous argument between he and Michael White when he first joined that team, um, where White implored him, hey, try the top of the racetrack. And Woods, basically told him to leave in a PG way. It was much more harsh than that, but you get the point. And then Woods goes on and wins the next 3 races. So the argument was completely forgotten about, and he was never asked to run the top of the racetrack again. So Woods is obviously committed to the bottom of the racetrack, and crew chiefs have had to, work with that over the years. Steve Wallace has done a fantastic job of giving his driver setups that worked on the bottom, and now it's David Jaquez's turn to do so. So Woods has always been a bottom feeder, and this really almost came back to bite him when Todd Kidd was catching, because outside lane had kind of started to rubber in, thanks to lap traffic and all that sort of stuff, just much more racing on the newly minted Computer Motor Speedway track service. The outside had really started to rubber its way in, and Kidd had figured that out. He picked up on that, and he was flying in those final. Once he got around Ross Jackson, he was the fastest car on the racetrack. The rest of the afternoon, and he was flying. You could see it lap after lap after lap. He'd take out 2 to 3 tenths in Woods on lap time, and Woods was stubborn. He was not willing to get off the bottom of the racetrack and experiment with the top at all. And it didn't help that he kind of told his crew chief, David Jaquez, and his spotter to shut up, let the old man handle it these last 15. And you understand why he did, just to kind of sit back and work in silence, but it almost came back to bite him, except for when Diego Urquidy, the 4-time champion, saved the day. White flag lap. Diego's about to go a lap down here. And typical Diego, he's not going to pull all the weight of the leaders. He doesn't care that they're battling for the win, especially considering it's Woods and Todd Kidd, 2 of his biggest rivals in the sport. You best believe he's not going to pull all the weight of them. So he hogs the bottom lane. He forces Woods to go up to the top of the racetrack. He forces Woods to mirror drive Todd Kidd. And this, while Kidd was able to close up as close as he had all race long and got him arrow tight off turn 2. And of course, Kidd can't lift in that sort of a situation. He can't let off the gas, because if he does, the race is over. But unfortunately, him trying to keep his foot in it while being arrow tight, that ended up killing his chances anyways. He ends up getting into the outside wall, and that was all she wrote. Woods was able to drive off into the sunset, and that was the race win. And how ironic that Diego's typical nature, not willing to pull over, give his arch rivals an inch, probably ends up leading to what will likely be Woods' final win in the sport. It's just everything truly coming full circle for Randle Woods. And just, I think it's got to be up there with Lucas Samber's win and Ross Jackson's win as one of the true feel-good stories to come out of the season. A season that's seen a lot of winless streaks snap, points proven, first career wins. It's been a wild year, and this is really just kind of adding to that. While we haven't really seen much parity in terms of team-wise, driver-wise, we've seen 10 different drivers win in 15 races this season. I mean, I'd say that's pretty damn good in terms of parity. We definitely want to see more teams in Michael White Racing and Ronnie Woods Motorsports competing on a weekly basis, sure, and competing for the championship. But I think that if Ford can get themselves back in the ball game, next season is going to be wild, to say the least. It's going to be wide open for anyone. But before we start talking 2027 championship fight, let's talk 2026 championship fight, because oh boy, did it get tight. It is tight. 2 races to go, and Braeden Bennett's points cushion that he had, bye-bye. He used over half of it up at Computer Motor Speedway, and The tagline going into the weekend is "No points lead is safe in the ASCA's backyard," and boy, did Braeden Bennett find out the hard way. Um, yeah, Bennett talk about a race to forget, and I will give Bennett this. There's a lot of things that went wrong for him. Car bottomed out immediately on the initial start. He slides way up the racetrack, nearly wrecked the entire field. Unfortunately, Brent Rennan got the short end of the stick. He ended up getting taken out by Marcus Edwards. So yeah, that happened. Then the car was not handling it at all, plowing off the corners. Bennett was having a really tough time. He drifted all the way back to 10. Then you head to the final restart. Bennett gets kind of clipped by Ian Adonde off turn 2. And that was nearly a disaster. It's like everything that could go wrong did go wrong for Braeden Bennett. And right after Kidd had his mulligan race, Bennett had his. And it doesn't help that Todd Kidd certainly responded with another runner-up finish. And man, here's the thing about this title fight, is Todd Kidd has been so good. If you erase his 2 DNFs to start the season, this championship battle isn't even close. Like, we're not even having a discussion about a title fight because Kidd is so far ahead that he probably would have it clinched, but he probably would have an opportunity to clinch this weekend if he didn't DNF the first 2 races of the season. The problem is, well, he did DNF the first 2 races of the season. And while he's been lights out since, he's got to, kind of shake off those bonuses and really just kind of hunker down and battle back these final 2 weeks. And listen, that's not to take anything away from Braeden Bennett because he's obviously been fantastic this season. He's had a career year. He still is the points leader, by rule and, by the actual standings. But I definitely think that overall, Todd Kidd has outperformed him this year. I mean, he's been ridiculous, 11 top 10s in the past 13 races. Yeah, the 2 crown jewels are what bit him. And even still, his 2 bad races in this entire stretch, the past 13, a 12th in the Windows 300 after he gets kind of pushed out of the groove on the final restart, and then an 11th in the Northern 200. Like, those are his 2 bad races, his 2 off weeks, quote unquote. And yeah, like other than that, Kidd has been lights out, since the DNFs and kind of battling back. Bennett, on the other hand, he's shown some cracks, and I will give him a ton of credit. Like I said, to salvage a top 10 in a race where so many things went wrong, that's huge. It's huge overall. But I think that this is an 11 team that has never been in a championship fight. Even when Dan Rogers was there, they had never been in a true title fight. They definitely weren't in any title fights when Devin Smith was there. And this is the first time that Braeden Bennett has truly elevated them to this level. We don't know. It's that unknown factor with this team compared to the 9 team that's been battle tested, that's been in title contention year in and year out, and that just got the job done last year, or they have that confidence that no matter what the deficit is, we can come back and win this. I don't know how Braeden Bennett is going to respond to a race weekend like this. I just don't. Whereas Todd Kidd, he just brushed it off like it was nothing. Qualified 11th for last week's race at CMS, battles back, ends up bringing home a runner-up result and nearly brings home the victory. How is Bennett going to respond? And to Bennett's credit, we saw him respond to an abysmal outing in Salt Lake. That 16th place day that he would want to forget there, he responded by bringing home a runner-up finish at Denver. So it's just one of those deals where There's a lot of unknowns surrounding Bennett that I just don't know if I can trust him compared to Kidd, where I know that team is battle tested. I know Kidd as a driver is battle tested. He's known as the comeback kid for a reason, and he might just pull off the ultimate comeback this season if he can have the upper hand these final 2 weeks, West Virginia and Belltown. And I think that something else that goes against Bennett these final 2 weeks, his only DNF of the campaign came at West Virginia, and it was driver error that caused it. Just got loose on the restart and ended up sliding up the track, careening into Lucas Sambert down into the inside wall. He dropped to as low as 13th in points after that race. Then he ripped off back-to-back victories. So Bennett has responded. To his credit, he's had some bad races. He's responded. The problem is, this is different. This is the penultimate round of the campaign. I don't think he's going to feel any bigger pressure than he is heading into the West Banco 250. And how is he going to cope with that pressure? He's had ice in his veins so far, but now you've got Todd Kidd within 5 points. It's getting real now. I still don't know if I can trust him, but I do think that performance-wise, I think Bennett is going to have the upper hand because we just saw how fast the Toyotas were at such a fast place like Computer Motor Speedway. Those speeds are going to carry over to West Virginia, 200 plus miles an hour entering turn one. Those speeds are going to carry over. So you need the aerodynamics to be correct. I think Toyota clearly has the advantage there. But that being said, we saw Todd Kidd able to search around and make up that aerodynamic deficit. He's certainly going to be able to do that at West Virginia throughout the entire racetrack. So, yeah, like that, Kidd's, it's not like Kidd isn't even in the ballpark. No, he's definitely got a shot there. And then Belltown, of course, we saw what happened there last year. So who's got the upper hand in these final 2 weeks? Gonna be tough. I think that performance-wise, I'd give it to Bennett, but mentally, I think Kidd has him beat. And just the combination of those two, watching two of the best drivers in the sport go head-to-head these last two races, man, I cannot wait. Now let's move on and discuss the organizations as a whole in this championship chase. Randle Woods Motorsports and Michael White Racing. So we all know the historic dominance Randle Woods Motorsports has had this season. They had won 6 out of the last 8, make that 6 out of the last 9. Then you've got Michael White Racing with Randle Woods' win. They've won 5 races this season. 2 for Bennett, 2 for Reddard, and now 1 for Randle Woods. And I kind of mentioned this in the performance department. I think that Michael White Racing has the performance advantage these final 2 weeks. The thing is, the driver advantage, I think I would give it to Randle Woods Motorsports. And here's the interesting part. Are we going to see team orders come into play like we did last season? I don't think Randle Woods Motorsports can afford to do that because they still have Shane Park technically in the mix. If Kidd and Bennett collide, Shane Park steals the championship. He's only 18 points back, so he's still within a full race. Like, you can't team order him and tell him to move out of the way. That's not going to fly too well, especially considering he's still in negotiations for a long-term contract with the team. Like, that's not going to fly. Colin Ward is still kind of on the outside looking in, but still he mathematically has a shot. Randle Woods mathematically has a shot at the title as well. But I do think that if they wanted to play some team order games with Randle Woods, I think that he would be probably less reluctant than a Park or a Ward to move out of the way. because obviously he has nothing left to prove. I think that realistically, he knows his third championship is not going to be on the cards in his farewell tour. And he knows that he's going to be in an executive role with the team. So overall, he wants to see the team win a championship by any means necessary. And he knows how tough Ronnie Woods Motorsports are going to be to beat down the stretch with three guys in the fight compared to Mike Wright Racing's two, with Bern Renard pretty much all but eliminated from title contention after his DNF. Um, so yeah, in terms of team orders, I think that Ronnie Woods Motorsports have their hands tied, whereas Michael Wright Racing, they really only have one guy really in the fight. Woods, like I said, is probably going to concede defeat. Renard is definitely out of it at this point, and then Jared Ayers. We don't even need to talk about Jared Ayers. He's been completely irrelevant, and I don't think he's going to be much of a factor in the fight at all, other than getting lapped a couple times these final 2 weeks. So yeah. Then you also got the Chris Barrymore factor, but again, in terms of team orders, they can easily tell him to move out of the way. He's not even top 10 in points. So again, he's not going to be much of a factor either. It's just going to be interesting these final 2 weeks. Will we see team orders deployed? Will we not? How much of a dynamic will that have on long-term relationships with the team? Bern Renard's contract with Michael Wright Racing is also up after the 2027 season. Just wanted to throw that out there as well. So yeah, you want to use team orders on him. He might decide, hey, maybe I want to go somewhere else now, where he's a veteran driver who's won 10 races and proven himself. Like, I don't think he's gonna take too kindly to being asked to move out of the way for his younger teammate. Just one of those deals where you're playing with fire using team orders in the ASCA, to say the least. Like, look at what happened with Ross Jackson last year. You're just playing with fire. So I would not advise it. I think that you have to let the drivers handle it themselves. Let Kidd and Bennett make the passes. Let them handle it themselves. If they need to pass a teammate, then so be it. If they can't pass a teammate, then that's on them. Because with Park and Ward and Wood still kind of being in the mix, I just would not advise team orders for either Ronnie Woods or Michael White right about now. I mean, look at Urquidy Birds Racing and the impact that team orders have had on Diego Urquidy and Carson Smith's relationship. It's now gotten to a point where Schmidt's fed up and he's basically 1 foot out the door, while Urquidy is still, pissy at Schmidt for making mistakes. It's a mess there because of team orders and having to kind of kowtow to Diego's every last will. Like, you don't want that sort of an environment, especially at two organizations that have been so cohesive and haven't really had much teammate drama this season. You don't want to add that into the mix. So I would definitely advise against team orders these final 2 weeks. But let's talk Craftsman Series Championship these final 2 weeks. Caden Dunham versus Gunnar Thorson. And I've been saying that this title fight certainly has lived up to the hype and then some. This is the future of the sport on full display. Like, Caden Dunham and Gunnar Thorson are going to race in the ASC for the next 10 to 15 years minimum. And we're just getting a glimpse of what their rivalry will look like at the cup level moving forward for the 2027 season and beyond. But I think that raw pace wise, I don't even think it's a discussion. We had this talk last week. Caden Dunham is a step above Gunnar Thorson, I think, in terms of raw pace. And that's not to take anything away from Thorson, because he's an excellent young prospect in his own right. But Dunham, he's just different. He's built different. He's a generational talent. The kid, his raw pace is unbelievable. You can't teach that. And That's why he's moving up to the Cup Series after just one season. You can't teach his pace. However, the problem is Dunham is incredibly sloppy. He has minimal racecraft right now. He has a bunch of enemies who are out to get him, including Thorson himself, including Tony Del Valle II. Especially when you fast forward to the final week of the season, you got guys like, luckily, I don't think Atwood's going to be entered for that race, but neither is Chris Barrymore. But you will probably have Doug Bowden in the season finale. Like, he's got enemies, he's got ops that he's got to deal with. And on back-to-back short tracks these final 2 weeks, I don't like that. There's no better place to get revenge than obviously on a short track. And I guarantee you, Tony Del Valle II, he remembers what happened at the San Diego weekend last year. He remembers Caden Dunham costing him the championship last year. He remembers that. We saw that with Todd Kidd and Ross Jackson. Kidd did not forget what happened in the Apple 225 a year ago. Tony Del Valle II won't forget what happened at San Diego a year ago. That's certainly going to be in the back of his mind. So Dunham has the advantage in terms of raw pace, but I think the consensus is Gunnar Thorson has much less ops to deal with, to put it bluntly. And it's a tough situation because it's unpredictable. You never know who's going to get revenge or if anyone's even going to get revenge on Dunham. It's one of those situations where if no one interferes with the title fight, then I think Dunham runs away with it these final 2 weeks. He pulls away and he gets the job done. But if someone like a Tony Del Valle II or a Doug Bowden has their say, gets their opportunity to teach Dunham a lesson, and to be fair, I would not criticize them in the slightest for doing so, getting their revenge on Dunham. I would not criticize them in the slightest, honestly. Like, I think that would be his comeuppance that would be well deserved. And it's one of those deals where you reap what you sow when it comes to Caden Dunham. And if someone were to do that and to get into the points leader, bump him out of the way, or even potentially take him out of the race, I think it's advantage Thorson. But overall, I think that my pick for the championship is Dunham. You can't pick against that raw pace. And San Diego and Belltown, we saw what he did last time out in Orlando, dominated that race. And while he doesn't really have much experience at either San Diego or Belltown, he'll figure it out. He's fast enough. He'll figure it out. So, yeah, these final 2 weeks, though, only 1 point separating these two guys. It's going to be tight. It's going to be fun. It's going to be unpredictable. And all I can say is buckle your seatbelts because, yeah, it's going to get wild. But let's talk Craftsman Series silly season before we sign off. Kirk Autosport. They have now expanded to 2 teams for next season, and they've signed 4-star 17-year-old prospect Drew Taylor from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to drive their full-time number 23 entry for the 2027 season, while also signing Nick Painter to a 1-year contract extension through 2028. So that kind of answers any questions on whether Nick Painter stays or will he goes. And let's touch on the Painter thing first. Painter is such a weird situation to evaluate because, yeah, he's won 3 races in 3 years, but what else has he done for the team over the past 3 years? Absolutely nothing. I don't think he's finished top 5, top 10 in points once in his tenure at the team. But he's won 3 races. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he pulls it off. He gets his 1 win and then he disappears the rest of the season. But hey, he's got another 2 years at that team for sure. And let's be real, I think the only reason he got these 2 years at the team is to kind of be that mentorship figure. We've seen what that has done for the Ford development program since Sean Wooden has taken that role for the team. And we've seen what it's done for even, I would say, a Hood Motorsports, where Zach Trenton has done a really good job this season. I think in large part thanks to the help that Cameron Barrymore has given him, kind of showing him the ropes a little bit. So I think that's what Kirk Autosport envisions for Nick Painter's role to be, with Drew Taylor kind of helping him out, 17-year-old young bright-eyed bushy-tailed kid. And they just don't want to throw him into the fire by himself. They want to give him a shoulder to lean on and something to fall back on to kind of help this kid out. And putting him in the best position to succeed. For Painter, I think it's the finesse of the year. You show up for one race a year and you get a 2-year contract extension. I mean, you can't go wrong with that one. But yeah, I understand why Kirk Autosport did it. It's just such a weird situation where you have a driver who only shows up, wins one race, and then dips. The other 13 is rewarded with a 2-year contract extension. You won't see that very often in the ASCA, but Painter does provide value to that team. And he, like Anthony Kirk himself said, Painter provides a solid baseline for what they want. Obviously, they don't want to be on this level of finishing outside the top 10 in points every year, but Painter's won them 3 races. He's laid down the foundation. Now they have it built up enough to where they can bring in a talent like a Drew Taylor, who they think is going to be the next big thing. And they put him in the best position to succeed. And the hope is that Taylor develops and ends up becoming a title contender. And who knows, maybe the next step is you take the team to Cup. So it's an interesting situation. But let's talk about Drew Taylor for a bit. Taylor, like I said, 17 years old, 4-star prospect, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 2026 ASCA Next Class member. The hype is real surrounding him. He has torn up the Midwestern short track scene for sure, to say the least. A kind of a pavement guy working the back roads of Wisconsin, his way up the ranks. I like the hire for sure. I don't think you can hate the hire, but I talked about this with Chandler Mills last time out. It's one of those deals where now the rubber needs to hit the road for all this hype surrounding Taylor as a 4-star prospect. Same kind of deal with Zach Trenton, but Trenton has lived, I would say he's lived up to the hype, to be honest with you. You can't expect much more than what you've gotten out of Zach Trenton this season. But yeah, for Mills and Drew Taylor, the rubber needs to hit the road next season. You got all this hype. You're an ASCA Next Class member. You're a 4-star prospect. Can you prove it? Because Lance Davidson and Chad Nelson, they were both 4-star prospects as well for Teams Enterprises. How'd that work out? Devin Smith was a 5-star prospect. How'd that work out? There's been plenty of 4-star prospects to come through the ranks. I feel like every team at this point has a 4-star prospect on their Craftsman Series roster. And if you all have 4-star prospects, then, the cream is really going to rise to the top. And someone's got to falter here. I'm not saying it's going to be Taylor, but it's just, we'll have to see if he can actually live up to the hype and really carry Kirk Autosport to where they want to be. And that's winning multiple races a season and competing for championships. So, yeah, we'll see how these moves work out, but I like them. I think that Anthony Kirk, the billionaire from Florida, I think he's building something special here in the ASCA. But finally, time to preview the penultimate race weekend in the sport. I guess we'll start with San Diego, and then I'll transition to the fastest track in the ASCA, breaking down all the action that will take place in Morgantown this upcoming week. So obviously, it's a standalone event for the Craftsman Series at San Diego, and man, it's going to be an interesting one to say the least. You got Andy Hayward, you got Nicolette Armstrong, you've got Kyler Hero, and then you've got Theo Russell back behind the wheel in the all-star cars for the cup teams. So Andy Hayward, I think, is going to be an interesting one that a lot of people are going to watch. He turned a lot of heads last time he was on the track in Orlando, runner-up finish. That was huge for his career. We've got a lot of different team owners that have kind of kicked the tires on him, done some more digging. We'll see if it turns into anything in the future for him in terms of opportunities, maybe a full-time Craftsman Series ride down the road. Because again, he is on the older side, 24 years of age, but a lot of pressure is going to be on him, um, for a part-time driver to continue to prove himself. And, we'll see if he's able to kind of live up to this newfound hype that he's drummed up for himself with that big result last time out. But obviously, all eyes are going to be on the championship. Caden Dunham versus Gunnar Thorson. And none of these guys really have much experience here. Dunham ran 38 laps in this race last season before, obviously, that incident happened with Tony Doval II. And then Gunnar Thorson was swept up on the subsequent restart melee that went down. So I really don't know what to expect out of either of them for this race weekend. Uh, I will say that Ford development program has been consistently dominant. I think I won what, like the last, I want to say 4 straight outings here in San Diego. I know 2022 and 2025 went to Sean Wooden, his final trip to this track, by the way. Salute to the defending champion. And then 2023 went to Graham Darty, youngest winner in ASCA history. In 2024 went to Ian Adonde. So you look at that and you say, wow, big advantage, Caden Dunham. But that's, again, if he does not run into Tony Doval II or Gunnar Thorson, So I'll say, like I said, as it tends to be, pace-wise, advantage Dunham. But don't discount Dunham's ability to mess things up for himself, as we saw at the Stone Yard. He should have entered this race weekend with a double-digit points cushion. Instead, he's only up by 1 because he was a bonehead and decided to dump Tony Doval II on the second restart of the race. This really stupid decision on his part. And it came back to bite him. And now he has no points cushion as a result. So if he's swept up in anything, it's going to be a huge opportunity for Gunnar Thorson to capitalize. But I don't know if Thorson, if that does not happen, I don't think that Thorson's going to be able to keep up with him. I don't think he's going to have the raw pace. So I think that you have to pick Dunham to win the race and to take a commanding lead heading into the finale at Belltown. But would I be shocked if he gets himself into something stupid or someone gets their revenge on him? Not in the slightest. And I think that's really the only chance Thorson has to really get himself back into this fight. I will say, if Dunham and if Thorson collide, Matt Chamberlain is lurking. 16 points back. We haven't talked much about him at all this season. He's lurking. Keep an eye on that number 8 car, because if he stays out of trouble, those two get together, who knows? Chamberlain can very well steal the championship from both of them. And what a story that would be, to say the least. But let's talk West Virginia, the fastest track in the ASCA. We kind of broke this down already, but I think that it's going to be an interesting one. Snoots Enterprises, I don't know what happened to them, but they have fallen off a cliff. Last time we were out here, Greg Healy was absolutely dominant. Lucas Zambert was right up there with him. They were the class of the field, but obviously they are not right now. Greg Healy is, 9th in points at the present moment. He's been eliminated from title contention. And when we visited here in the campaign, we thought he was a title favorite. So crazy how much has changed. I, you look at how dominant Healy was, and I have a hard time even thinking it's going to be a factor, to be honest with you. It really wasn't much of one the last time I had a computer motor speedway. I just think that snoots have failed to keep up with the new regs and the constantly rapidly evolving nature of them, as well as Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Michael Wright Racing have this season. I think that it's a big opportunity for Braeden Bennett, who was the only other driver besides Healy to lead laps at West Virginia earlier this season. Bennett's got a big chance to bounce back if he can stay out of trouble this time around. Todd Kidd also scored his first top 10 finish at West Virginia earlier this season, mind you. I think that this is probably Ford's best chance to win a race this season, specifically Rikishi versus Racing. Carson Smith, keep an eye on that 12 car. He has been red hot. He really, I don't know what it is about the final quarter of the season, but it seems like every time he wakes up these last 4 races and gets on a big run. And he just finished 3rd last time out at Computer Motor Speedway. If you're looking for a dark horse pick, keep an eye on that number 12. Diego, his qualifying rows still have yet to be figured out. So until they are, I'm not picking him. Cameron Atwood, I also think you go to another track where tire wear is going to be a factor. I think you definitely have to keep an eye on that number 17. I just don't know if CJ Barrymore Racing have the pace to really give him much of an opportunity to compete. But overall, I think this is going to be yet another Ronnie Woods Motorsports versus Michael Wright Racing war. And like I said, performance-wise, I trust the Toyotas. I trust Braeden Bennett. But mentally, I trust Todd Kidd. And I'm going to pick the defending champion to win this race and to take that lead heading into the final round of the campaign. Who knows? They could end up tied again like they were last year, like Kidd and Diego Rikishi were last year. I don't think they will because that's like a once-in-a-lifetime type of thing. But, yeah, I do have Todd Kidd winning this race, and I think I'm going to have to pick Todd Kidd to win this championship. I just think you can't count this 9 team out right now. Even after a disastrous weekend like they had in the Order 200, they bounced back with the runner-up finish. You can't count this team out. And Todd Kidd, he's going to come to play, the defending champion. I think he's going to get the job done at the fastest track in the ASCA. But that's it for this edition of Around the Association. Thank you all for listening this long. If you did, much appreciated. And we'll see you after what should be a fantastic action-packed weekend from San Diego and West Virginia.